So today I'm down at Crookhaven Heads, which is a beautiful beach not far from where I live, and it's a very rocky headland with just really interesting elements to it. Like, I don't know if you can see behind me here, there's some teepees. We'll go back up there later and have a look at that. But I decided to do this down here because it is a part of that whole idea of preparation. Working in places like this has been where I have prepared for shoots, especially in terms of getting to know a new camera and working with the dogs who are currently roaming around and photographing them. Because they move quickly, that has given me the opportunity to get to know the functions of this new camera and just how to change them quickly because they move so fast. But preparation for photography, it goes deeper than that. It's not just about the technicalities, and especially portrait photography. It is definitely not just about technically taking a great shot. And when I first started photography, I wasn't even a teenager yet. I was only 12 when I first picked up my dad's SLR camera and fell in love with the fact that I could capture these beautiful stories through a lens. And so that led me to not only having a passion for photographing, but even working with people. So in my early 20s, I went to university and studied visual arts and design. But before that, I took a course in photography, and particularly portrait photography. Even though prior to doing that course, I photographed mostly landscapes and animals in the wild. I actually wanted to be a National Geographic photographer. That was my aspiration. I had others, but that was a real passion of mine, to actually go out into wild nature and capture the animals in their living environment. But in the end, I found that working with people was quite a big passion of mine that I didn't even realise at that time. And so I did a course in portrait photography. And I was taught, it was a night school course, with a portrait photographer in his gallery with a small group of people. And we also went out and did, night photography, working with lighting and doing creative expression kind of photos with lights. So we did more than just portraits, but portraits was a big focus in that. And at the end of that course, he got us to print up our final piece, and we did an exhibition. And he pulled up my photo and he said, "Now I'm going to show you all the elements in this photo that I told you not to do." And I was kind of cringing, thinking, oh, here we go. And he said, "But I also want to show you why everything she's done actually works." And that for me is a part of preparation. It's learning the rules, and then it's working on how to break the rules and how to create something unique to your expression and unique to the person that you're photographing. And at the time, I'd photographed my boyfriend at the time in his home in front of a window, or next to a window, which was heavily side lit. And I loved that portrait of him. It expressed him and who he was at that time. However, there were a lot of elements in it that broke the rules that this portrait photographer had taught us about how to take a technically good photo. But I'm not just about capturing the technically good anything. I like to actually have that element of expression come through. And so I carried that into my business going forward to university, and I studied visual arts and design, and photography was a part of that. And I actually took photos of fellow students for them to send back to their family, because we were at a campus that was in the country, kind of disconnected from society a little bit. So most of us lived on campus, or after the first year I ended up renting a house with a group of friends in the nearby village. But a lot of people were very far away from home. So I was taking them up onto the water tanks and working with puddles and reflections and taking creative shots of them, because they were learning about themselves while they were at university. They were changing, they were evolving into their own expression. So I was capturing that, and then they were sending that back to their family to share their journey. When I was 23, I started my first business as a portrait photographer. At that time, I worked predominantly with Latin and ballroom dancers. I took them out of the studio and into the wild, and I photographed them on location, dancing freely in a location like this. This would be beautiful for that type of shoot because I would get them out of their regular regalia and more into flowing kind of costume, not even costume, just flowing like their practice wear. And I would let the wind carry the fabrics and them creating beautiful forms, and we'd have a portable stereo with music playing and they'd dance to it, and I would capture their movements and expression. And that, at the time, this is 28 years ago, at the time that was going against the grain. And I loved that. I loved the expression that came through in that. So this has got nothing to do with preparation, but it just, the reason I bring all of that up is to just share what the background is in my portrait photography. So I then went on to run that business full-time for almost 10 years. I had my first son while I was a wedding and portrait photographer. I went into weddings. Interestingly enough, it was my wedding photographer who encouraged me to go into wedding photography. She mentored me, and that meant that I had some kind of predictability with my work. It allowed me to book events 2 years in advance, and I knew what was coming up. And as a new portrait photographer, that actually served me at the time. Whoa! As a new portrait photographer, that served me at the time. I was newlywed and wanting to create some stability in my life. I planned to have children and run that business. That was always the intention. So I was preparing for this lifestyle that I thought would support me in being able to be a mother and run my own business, doing something that utilised my creative expression and passion. And that's why I started that business. Now, after I had my first child and realised just how challenging it was to balance the on-location shoots as well as be available to what he needed as well, that was actually harder than I expected. So, and then not being able to fall pregnant and have a second child very easily, I decided nearly 10 years in to let it go. And not because I didn't love it, but because it didn't align at the time. But there was a lot of foundation work that went into actually preparing for a shoot. And over the last 28 years since starting that business, I've also moved into artisanal work and working as a coach, working with people in their business and their wellness, and that's about preparation of self, which is part of what I want to talk to you about here, because I think it's really important that anything that we do, we start with ourself. So my preparation for portrait photography is not just about what I'm going to get out of the client, it's how I show up at those shoots. So doing things like this, I'm currently walking on unstable ground with my camera bag on my back. I mean, I've photographed here, so I've often done that as well, but it's that whole preparing my body for what I'm going to do is a big part of it. When I first moved to this location, I didn't intend to get back into portrait photography. I was taking a hiatus from coaching and my artisanal work, and I was just rediscovering where it was I wanted to move forward in my career direction. And portrait photography just came up as a part of that. But even before that, I decided it was really important for me as a 51-year-old single woman to actually build my strength and agility, because I was taking the dogs out to these wild locations, often with them having to be on leads, two big dogs pulling me down hills and across rocks. And I just felt the need to improve my balance, improve my strength, and improve my agility so I could climb up on things. And that has actually served me in my portrait photography. So it's looking at the foundations. What do I need to take care of myself to be able to fulfill the objective that I'm trying to fulfill in service to anyone in anything that I do. Even part of that was actually not having my children nearby, just not wanting to risk injury and then having no one to help me around here. So I didn't want to be a burden to my children. But it is actually serving me very well now that I'm getting back into portrait photography. One of the shoots that I did the other week, I also have invested in some barefoot hiking boots so that when I'm walking on these uneven, slippery surfaces, I just have a little bit more grip and agility in my feet. When I was originally a portrait photographer working on the coast, I had experienced slipping on wet rocks and trying to save my camera but injuring myself to save my camera. So I just knew from experience that I didn't want that again, so I got these barefoot boots for that. But the day that we did that shoot in the forest and I was walking on a log which was mossy, I actually left my barefoot boots in the car and I didn't change my shoes. And I was in my Doc Martens, which are comfortable but slippery. But at that point, as I was walking across this log with my camera in my hand and my gear all on me, I just realized how important my personal training was in preparation for what I was wanting to achieve. Because I was able to balance myself and not fall over and, one, not be able to continue on with the shoot, or two, not be able to get the shots of the client who was there. We dedicated a whole day to capture. So that is a part of this, is that preparation of self. And then there's this self-awareness as well. Like I do struggle with self-doubt. I do struggle with, even though I put in years of learning and skill building and, understanding not only technicality, but how to capture that creative expression in a person and their soul essence, I still get to the end of a shoot and feel fulfilled and feel alive, and that's why I'm doing it. But then I also snap into self-doubt and I start to analyze all the things that I could have done better, all of the things that I didn't do that I should have done. And I've really had to work with that. I've really had to work on not letting that stop me from continuing on. And so a part of what I do in order to prepare myself, not just for the day, but for the next shoot, is I do a big reflection after the shoot. I actually write down the things that I did, the conditions of the day, starting with that, the conditions of the day. What was it like? What were the challenges that I was faced with that I couldn't plan for, didn't know were going to be there? Just gonna look for the dogs. Give us! What were the challenges of the day that I couldn't plan for, that I didn't know I would be confronted with, and how did I overcome them, or what would I do next time to be able to account for that? And that is a really important part of my learning journey. I did that I've done that in all of my businesses. When I first started selling at markets, my artisanal wares, I met a lady who said, I record the conditions of the day, the theme of the weekend, if there is a theme, the number of sales, yes, that's important, and the products that you sell, but it's more about the energy around the day and how that impacted the sales on the day. So preparation for me is not just about turning up and doing the job on that day. It is everything around it. It is that all the elements that contribute to it. So in my reflection, I also write about the client and how they were feeling on the day, what they struggled with. If I had a client who turned up and said, I've actually had some sleepless nights, I've been unwell, I take that into account, and then I reflect on what we did to actually move them past the challenge that they were experiencing so that I can carry that into the next shoot. Because with portraits like this, especially one that I had recently where I was working with a single mum who's self-employed. We were working in school holidays when her son wasn't with her and she had a whole day. It's not an easy thing to just go and reschedule a shoot. So we had spent weeks preparing for her shoot, looking at what the brand story is, what she wanted to capture in the stories of the photos, gathering the elements that would support that, choosing from my artisanal wares what she could wear to especially for the warrior woman look that she wanted, and even sourcing a beautiful timber bow from someone who lives in our local area and does deer hunting with this bow. Like, we had all these elements that we'd brought together for this day, and so on that day we want to get the most out of it. And leading up to that shoot, we had the most horrendous weather of consistent rain, heavy cloud-covered days, and I was like, oh my goodness, we're pretty much locked into this day, and I've got a new camera that I really don't want to have destroyed, but at the same time I'm really passionate about capturing these photos, and we agreed that we would do it even in the rain. But I had to prepare for that. Not only did I have to prepare for it physically, I had to prepare for it mentally. So again, it's this practicing walking on slippery surfaces, enhancing my balance and my ability to balance. And then I bought plastic covers to protect my camera, and an umbrella that was a white umbrella, so it could act more like a diffuser if I needed to put that on me, because I didn't want to shade her. And I myself went and sourced a merino icebreaker long sleeve hooded top, which had a quilting hood to protect against the wind, because the wind has been really icy of a morning, and we were starting at sunrise on the beach with her in her spearfishing gear. And it was just like, I walk on the beach most mornings with the dogs, and sometimes it's quite bitterly cold. So when you're actually in the middle of trying to capture some beautiful photos of someone, the last thing I need is to be tightening up because my ears are too cold or my fingers are frozen. So it's preparing for all conditions. That morning was actually beautiful and it didn't rain, but it was very cold. And that top came on and off throughout the day because we then went into a forest, and then in the afternoon we ended up on a mountaintop. We hiked up to the top of a mountain to do a sunset shoot. So all of these elements that we added into the day that could potentially be challenging had to be accounted for. So the preparation is in what to take to account for all conditions. But let's go back a little bit further than that. Even before cleaning lenses, checking batteries, making sure I've got plastic to cover equipment and an umbrella to cover me and the camera, I run a consultation session with clients, and this has been something even right from the beginning of my first photography business 28 years ago. I did this. I always sit down and I talk to the client about what the objective is, what we are trying to achieve, what we're trying to actually capture. Not even for portraits that we're just getting personal family shots. It wasn't so much for the marketing that these images were going to be used for, or the brand representation, but it was for their personal representation. What do they want to have captured as their essence and their family story? Now I take that into brand portrait photography, and I want to know what the objective is for the client. Who are they targeting through these images? Because these images are going to speak to people even before they read their bio. So who are they targeting? What are their values? What do they want to come across in these images that express their core values? That's an important part too. And I spend a good hour, sometimes longer, in a session consulting with the client on not only what do they want the images to be like, but what actually makes them feel most relaxed. What environments do they feel most themselves in? What time of day works for them? It helps us plan out how to strategize the day in a way that gets the most out of it. So we're not just getting there, locked into a time, just purely based on light and convenience of location, and then just checking off boxes in terms of, okay, so we want a portrait, so we want the sun on this side of the person, and we want to use a filtered light area. It's more than that, because we're telling a full story here. It's about them personally and their business offerings. So my consultations are critical. The other thing that I know sounds like common sense, but nutrition. not only on the day, but leading up to it. Making sure that I'm eating food that is supportive to me, feeling my most vital and establishing the foundations of well-being so I can think clearly, so I can act effectively. I've actually made cacao and taken cacao with me, not just for me, but also for the client if possible. Not each shoot has had that, but it is something that I will try to do as much as possible, because we want to stay nourished and focused. We don't want to be feeling depleted, and we don't want to have sugar highs and lows. And I actually serve cacao for our consultation as well, because it is a heart opener, and this is a heart opening experience. I really want the client to go in and actually connect with what the objective is for this, in terms of not just getting nice photos of them, but in terms of their brand ethos, their brand story, and being able to use them over and over again for different purposes, not just for a headshot. But on the day, having cacao, I have found, has kept me going, especially for that very early morning shoot where we start at sunrise. For me, that's okay anyway, because I don't have breakfast as soon as I wake up. I actually like to get my metabolism activated before I sit down and have a meal. But for the client who might have breakfast straight up in the morning, I want to make sure that they have something in their system that's going to stay with them for a little while. I actually think it's a really lovely way to start off a session, if possible. Like I said, it may not be something that happens all the time, but just keeping that in mind, that if there is the potential to do it, I will do it, because I find that it is very supportive for me and the client. So the final thing I want to share with you about preparation in terms of portrait photography is a willingness to explore and discover and actually keep my creative expression alive. So trying new things is a part of that, actually putting myself in the position of the client. I am currently embarking on a journey which I'll share more with you about another time, because that's a big discussion in itself. But it is a journey of me putting myself in a position of being just a little bit uncomfortable and actually pushing my boundaries to express myself creatively in a way that I haven't for a very long time. And that helps me feel what my clients feel as well. So when they come to me saying, I don't photograph well, I don't like being in front of the camera, or my experience with being photographed has shifted over the years, I get it. Started photographing people, and portraiture in particular, because I understood what it felt like to feel uncomfortable in front of the camera. And now I've moved into the business branding portrait photography, because I have spent the last 28 years as someone who has continually grown and evolved as a business owner, starting new businesses based on my unique skills and offerings. And I have had to share my brand story in each one of those businesses and learn what works and what doesn't in terms of connecting with the ideal client. So I'm super passionate about that. And as someone who was a business coach for years, working with small and micro business owners on their digital presence, when I first started my photography business 28 years ago, the internet was only new. It was, yes, I had a website, but it wasn't as prominent a part of a business offering as it is now, which is a beautiful thing, because it allows us to do this, to work from anywhere and reach clients globally. And that's an amazing element of the internet. But understanding how to connect with people through that is a really important thing. So working with business owners on their brand story and presence online really opened up my eyes to some of the gaps in what people, how they present themselves online, and how they and where they're actually at. It can be easy to just put up a photo from 10 years ago and go, that'll do, that's me, but it doesn't actually really portray the person and the wisdom that they've gathered in the time that they've operated their business, or even the depth of their knowledge, or just the energy of their presence. So I think it's really important for that. But I know what it's like to feel uncomfortable in front of the camera. So that's why I wanted to start helping people have beautiful photos captured of them, but now in the business branding element, it goes another layer deeper. It's actually having your ethos come across as well, and the brand story behind your ethos, and what direction are you heading in? That's a part of it too. For me personally, taking myself through that experience of feeling that resistance, that hesitation, the fear, that's why I've embarked on some new things that are actually giving me that experience. So I remember what it's like, because I've been in business for 28 years and I've captured many photos over the years of myself since. Like, even though I hated being photographed when I was younger, I developed this understanding of the importance of it when I mostly focused on artisanal work and I was photographing my products on models. I noticed that actually did not connect with my ideal client as well as those products being photographed on me or on another person who represented the target audience, and the target audience was not models. So keeping that in mind, I've gone, okay, so it's really critical that I learn to be comfortable in front of the camera with the vision in mind of who I'm here to serve. Because it's not about how I look in front of the camera, it's about allowing the other person who's looking at that photo to see themselves in the photos and go, wow, she's a regular woman and that looks amazing on her, so I could do that too. When it was on a model, it detached them from the reality of how they could feel in the products. I had customers come into my shops actually put things on and say, the reason I'm actually trying this on is because I saw it on you. And that's powerful, because I'm no model, but I feel very comfortable in my skin now because I've developed that. I've prepared myself to feel comfortable in my skin. And that's what I want to get across here, that it is important for us to take our focus off us a little bit and actually see things from the perspective of the client. What is it they're going to be looking for? Because that's what we want to represent in our imagery, so that that resonates with them, that they can get that from working with us. So I want to take you over here to have a look at these teepees, and then I need to get the dogs onto leaves, because this is such a beautiful location. It's a bit windy here today, so as I get closer to the teepees, the wind may become a bit of a problem, but I still want to show you, because a part of the storytelling is the location itself. Oh, sorry, Gibbous. So look behind me here at these teepees. Aren't they amazing? I just love the creative expression that has gone into creating these. There were more along the beach that stretches down that way behind us is a rocky beach, and there were teepees all along it. However, the ocean has taken some of the driftwood back, so that's a little bit sad. The dogs and I used to hang out there a lot, but that's okay. We still have these ones here and they're beautiful. So I thank you for listening to my stories around preparation, which is more than just picking up my camera, cleaning the lenses and charging the batteries and picking a time and location and just taking people's photos. It goes so much deeper than that. And I'm really passionate about doing that to the best of my ability and continuing to grow and learn and serve from a place of exploration, discovery, curiosity, leaning into something different that will open up a whole new magical perspective that I wouldn't have had otherwise if I didn't lean in.